Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes for people to filter in, and then we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to give it a minute or two for more folks to come on in. Hey, everyone. I see a few of you have found the chat feature, which is great.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with everyone.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started very shortly. All right. Welcome, everyone. Super excited for you to be joining this webinar today. Quick introduction. My name is Hana Chaudhury, and I am an alumni of the Young Directors Program. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the land that I'm calling in from today, which is currently known as Toronto. This land is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13 with Mississaugas of the Credit. I recognize that many of you are calling in from different territories, and I invite you to consider your connection to this land. As a settler, it is my duty to acknowledge the historical and contemporary and current injustices that Indigenous people face, and that we recognize and uphold our responsibility as treaty people. It is also critical that we understand and are aware of the ways in which our participation in events like this and the ways that our broader work can impact Indigenous sovereignty. All right, so for today's topic, we will be talking all about win-win negotiations. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about how Girls20 and Revlon Canada have partnered to make this interactive webinar series possible. So leveraging the Revlon ColorStay territory of made to be life-proof, and in alignment with Girls20's mission to advance the full participation of young women leaders in all decision-making spaces, we want to champion you, our women leaders, and empower your growth. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited for this conversation. We know the topic of negotiations and learning to negotiate can be intimidating, especially early in our careers, but it is a critical skill to build. So after today's webinar, we hope that you'll be able to walk away with the skills to navigate your next negotiation and the confidence to master negotiation dynamics to get a win-win situation every time. So firstly, quick agenda. We're going to start off with a fireside chat between myself and Michele Romanow, who I'll introduce shortly, and you can see on the screen. And afterwards, you'll have the opportunity to participate in a workshop with Nadia Theodore. At the very end of the webinar, and as a reward for everyone that sticks out till the end and engages with us in the comments, we will be drawing 2 winners to receive a full year's supply of Revlon ColorStay products. Quick housekeeping. We want you to engage in the chat. Please let us know what you're liking, what you're resonating with. Just note that all new messages actually appear at the top, which you've probably been seeing already, not the bottom. And then for Q&A, so if you take a look at your text bar on the bottom right of your screen, right above that, you should see where it says chat mode. If you click on it, it'll change to Q&A mode. So you can just click that to change it up, and you can do that if you have a question for any of the speakers. And if you're engaging with any of the other attendees, please do so in chat mode. We will also be asking you to answer some polls throughout the webinar, and we'd love if you could participate. All right, now for the reason we're all here, I want to start off with an introduction of Michele. So Michele Romanow is a serial entrepreneur who started 6 companies before her 35th birthday. A dragon on CBC's hit show Dragon's Den, Michele is a co-founder and president of Clearco. Clearco has invested more than $2 billion into 4,600 companies, making them the biggest e-commerce investor in the world. In 2015, Michele became the youngest judge on CBC's Dragon's Den and has been a dragon for the last 6 seasons. A prolific investor, Michele was recently named among Fortune's 40 Under 40, a young global leader by the World Economic Forum, one of Canada's most powerful women, and Canada's Angel Investor of the Year. She has also created digital solutions for many of the world's leading brands, including P&G, Netflix, Starbucks, and Cirque du Soleil. Michele is also a director for Vail Resorts, BBTV, and Queen School of Business. Michele also co-founded the Canadian Entrepreneurship Initiative nonprofit with Sir Richard Branson. So please welcome Michele Romanow. I'm super excited to have this chat with you, Michele.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Are you kidding me? This is awesome. I love Revlon and the life-proofness of their products. And it's great to see what you guys have done with Girls20. And honestly, I never get asked about negotiation, but I think it is probably one of the top 3 reasons I've been successful in my career. I was not born as an incredible negotiator, but I have made myself an incredible negotiator. So I'm happy to share everything that I have learned along that journey.
That's amazing to hear. So let's jump right into our first question.
Yeah.
So throughout your career and various ventures, I want to learn a little bit about how you've used and especially developed, like you just said, your negotiation skills, and how has that helped you with your entrepreneurial ventures and in general through your career?
So when you zoom back and think about a company, there's a couple ways you can develop competitive advantage. And so everyone, would love to build a monopoly in their mind and would love to have no competitors. But one of the things people rarely think about is that if you build a structural cost advantage in your company, you can always win because you can outspend your competitors. So, if everyone's selling a product for $10 or $5 of product cost, and you're selling that same product for $10 with $2 of product cost, you can take your cost down to $6. You can go, put triple the amount of money into marketing. Like you can do a whole lot more. And the reality is that everyone has, and I tell this to everyone, literally sometimes I start the negotiation with this. I'm like, I'm going to be your least expensive client, but I'm going to be your favorite. And I set it up that I can't overpay, that I am a startup and a founder, and I have to be very cost conscious, which is one of the reasons I've been successful. There is so much beg, borrow, and steal when you start a company, which is, get people, get favors, all sorts of things like that. But I set that up and I deliver on that promise. And I've said that to, every agency, any vendor, doesn't matter if they're selling a software or there's something. And I say that, like, look, I understand that, most of your clients you're getting 100 grand for. The most I can pay you is 60 grand. But I will be your favorite. And I will figure out in those negotiations what those people need. So, if you're hiring an ad agency, the thing that they need is new customers. Well, look, I know a lot of people in my network that ask me for referrals and advice. And I actually take the time to bring new companies, new business all the time, which in many ways is more valuable than the fees that I can offer them. And so that's one of the ways that I think about that. It's also, I think women often get very uncomfortable in negotiation. Negotiation is scary because you have to be willing to walk away. Negotiation is scary because you have to say and you have to anchor at a big number. And like when I do it on the phone, it's like, I can still tell you, I'm like, the most I can pay is this. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, don't pause. I have to pause. You have to like not give away anything else. And it's still scary. Every time I do it, I am asked to do tons of negotiation. But the biggest thing is I negotiate every day of my career. Every person you hire is a negotiation. Every vendor you bring on is a negotiation. When you raise money for your company, the valuation of your company is a massive negotiation. And so women, if they want to be successful, they need to get comfortable with the skills around this. And the best part is once you start getting better in it, it like keeps growing on one another. And you have to be authentic to your own style. Like people know when you're bullshitting them or not, right? And so these are the things that I really care about. And I tell people what matters to me. I take a genuine care and interest in people's lives and what matters to them. I try and be helpful and orthogonal that are never ways that are about, dollars here and there. And I think that served me really well.
That's amazing. I want to focus in on one piece you mentioned about how, sometimes young women have difficulty, and in general, I think negotiation can be a thorny subject. Yeah. But did you find there were any specific barriers for you when it came to negotiating, either when you were younger or as a woman or just in general? And how did you navigate those barriers or challenges that you were facing?
It's a really good question. And my real honest answer and advice is it's not a question I like to spend a lot of time thinking about, because I think this is one of the things where the more you know and the more stats you read makes you less effective, not more effective. So, like there's a stat that women get, half of the money they ask for when they go fundraise, or they're half as successful as male counterparts, or their businesses are taken half as seriously. You know what? That actually might be true, but that doesn't help me. If I walked into a negotiation and mentally thought there was even a shot that I was going to be half as successful, that you build yourself a self-serving prophecy. Like I walk into that meeting knowing one thing: I am a strong entrepreneur and an operator, and I am going to share my story in the absolute best way I can. And number two, that the only thing I can't control what I look like, and I cannot control that I am, that I am a woman, but I can certainly control the number of meetings I go to. And so I just tell myself, when I'm going to fundraise, I'm going to do 100 meetings. And that means I'm going to hear 90 no's. And that means that's okay. And it hurts a lot less when that happens. And so, I actually like to look, especially on this point, at the flip side. I think people are, on general, way more scared to negotiate with women. It's actually a funny game that we play at Clearco, where me and my co-founder Andrew run the company together. And Andrew's like, he'll set up a deal, he'll get everyone excited, and he's like, oh, you're just gonna talk to my co-founder Michelle, she's gonna figure out all the details. And they think they're gonna get the soft and fuzzy. And then I'm like, it's so exciting that Andrew wants to partner with you. We have a third of the budget you thought you did. So it's like a running joke in the company that you weren't going to get the last 10 minutes you were hoping for. You're going to get something very different. And so I've just never, so that's the first thing. The other thing is you can be surprising, right? There is just not as many, you're very memorable when you're a woman in business. And so that's the other thing you use to your advantage. I mean, half of, awareness and getting to the top of someone's desk and the top of someone's inbox is to be memorable. And so I've always thought of that as an advantage. And I think today we are looking for, business leaders that are women. We are looking for those examples. The press is looking for that. It has never been a better time to be a woman in business. I mean, I look constantly to my grandmother, who's 2 generations younger than me. And, she never had the option to be an entrepreneur, right? Her option was be a nurse or be a school teacher. And so I think about that, and it puts a lot of gratitude and perspective, where it's like, yep, there may be glass ceilings, there may be stats that are not favorable, but all I can control is how hard I work. And I don't want to ever poison my mind with this is going to be harder for me. Like I'm on my own mission. And then collectively, organizations like us work together to make a different reality in the future. I mean, Clearbank has funded 8 times more women than the venture capital industry average. And we built a whole system that took the bias out of that. And so you can then do things. But what I think people get confused about is if they read a stat, it's like, there has to be a different way to solve the problem. You can't just, make yourself and your bargaining position weaker by believing in that stat.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Especially with negotiation, your mindset has to really be very strong going into that.
Totally.
So I can imagine that there's no really value in thinking about those stats going into something.
Yeah. No, it's just best. And then you just prepare. You're just putting your best foot forward. You're thinking about the, couple key points you have to deliver, and then you're listening and you're trying to hear and use your intuition to assess. Women are incredibly intuitive people and have exceptional instincts around negotiation, around how far you can push, around if there's something else that's preventing you from getting a deal. Like, you want to trust all of that, because that's going to give you insight that could totally change a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point. And, women have historically made negotiations that may not be traditional, but definitely we can draw upon that. So I want to touch a little bit about the challenges that you may face in a negotiation, right? I'm sure you've had some thorny ones.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit about one of your most challenging ones, and how did you make it a win-win approach?
Yeah, I think you always start with a win-win. You start with that if you uncover everything both parties want, you could see a lot more that wasn't there before. And so I think sometimes we get ourselves into this rut where we believe we can't offer anything because we're young or we're not as, advanced in our professional career. And you can never take that approach. You have to take the approach of like, what else can I find? So one of the funniest stories I have on this topic is I actually remember early in, Clearco history, we were trying to do a deal with a big bank. And, I got this bank executive that's super important, incredibly senior. And I'm trying to get, time, and I'm trying to figure out, and this is really like, we need one of their products. So it's not, I don't have a lot, like I'm kind of asking for a big take. I don't have a big give right now. And I just spend, 5 minutes talking about his life. And he's actually telling me how he's American, but he's in Canada. And, he's going to spend his whole weekend doing this immigration thing where one of the things you have to do on your PRs, you have to count the number of days you were in each country. And he's like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go through my calendar. It's going to take forever. And I was like, oh my God, I know something for you. There's actually a government website that does this that almost no one knows about. And he's like, no way. And I was like, yes, I'll send you the link. So I gave him something that was completely free, that cost me nothing, that allowed him to spend his entire weekend that he had written off with his kids. And that probably did more than any gift I could have provided, anything else. And so, sometimes we look too granular. We look about, okay, well, people want to do deals and negotiate with people they like, and people they feel like they're building a relationship, and people they feel that they care about them. One of the things that I do all the time is I send really funny, ridiculous gifts to people, because I find the surprise and delight of that out of control. And they never cost that much. And you got to actually be careful, because when you start to send people really expensive gifts, there's all these corporate policies that prevent that. And then they do this thing where I can't take this, and that's weird. But for example, I made a joke on a call that we're all going to need a drink after something. And one of the lawyers was like, oh my gosh, no, we can't have a drink. I've been, what I mean? I need to detox, not retox. And I literally sent a case of 50 green juices to his house. And he laughed so hard. He thought this was the funniest thing. And so this might not seem like it's related to negotiation, but that's actually where you get your leverage. That's actually where you get people that tell you a little bit more, that trust you, where you can start using some of these tactics. So, one of the things that I always try and get is the number that people are looking for. And so people don't want to tell you a number. So, what you do is I'm I'm going to be like, Hannah, okay, so is this what's the number? And you're going to be like, Michelle, I can't tell you that. And I'm going to be like, So you don't want that, because as soon as someone says, I can't tell you that, they've already created a position. So what I actually do instead is I say, okay, well, my guess is this is like over $400, and I really overestimated or underestimated. And you want to make something where they have to correct you. So you're gonna be like, no, it's not $400. It is one of this gene within us that oftentimes can't put up with silence. And so rather than silence, they're going to start talking, and they're going to start telling you things. And so you have to say, well, the most I can do is 100. And you have to pause, and you have to create the silence, and you have to let them respond. Like when I do it on my phone, I actually press mute, and then I'm like, no one talk. Like I'm literally, like many of us are on speakerphone. I'm like, no one can say anything right now. Because you have to create them coming back. Mm-hmm. And then, the hardest thing, and I know we're talking about win-win negotiations, which I think is always the first approach you should use. You should always use other bargaining chips that you have, but you cannot be afraid to have a negotiation that is just a negotiation. There are some negotiations where it is just a pie, and you either get the piece of pie or your counterpart gets the piece of pie. And I think sometimes women especially are so afraid of a negotiation going that way. And it's like, no, that's okay if it does that. So a perfect example of a pie negotiation is with a venture capitalist. So you are going to sell a piece of your company for $1 million or $10 million or $100 million, and they are going to take, 10%, 20%, or 30% of your company. And there is no, you're negotiating a couple small terms on board seats and a couple small things, but valuation is 95% of this negotiation. And there is no win-win in the negotiation. There is, you take more of my company or you take less of my company. And so in those cases, the negotiating techniques around anchoring, I find, are incredibly important. This is one of the hardest things you need to learn to do. When you start a negotiation, you have to anchor at a very high point, because you will almost always come down from that. Mm-hmm. So, if you want to close, a deal and you're valuing your company and you want to close it at a $50 million valuation, you have to say, look, we're getting other term sheets at $75 million. And you have to say that. You have to pause, and you have to be completely confident when you say that. And then the second part of anchoring is you have to react when people give you the lowball number. And so it's funny, because it's one of the things I've had to teach Andrew over time, is that when someone says, well, the most we can do is $40 million. If you say nothing, or if you don't react, that is seen as an implicit agreement. And this is really hard to figure out, is you cannot just, you have to react. You have to, immediately after you hear it, you have to be like, even if you're like, would be happy to do a deal at 40 million, you're like, you know what? I don't think that's going to work for our board. I don't think that's going to work for our team. Like, I'll think about it, but you're out of range. And you have to produce that reaction, or else people think that you've agreed. This actually happens with our employees all the time. They'll give us like an idea that they throw out of nowhere. And, for things that are not important, you can say, I think about it. But when you don't give them any reaction, they're like, well, I ran it by Michelle. It seemed fine. And they've kind of implicitly started to go. So that would be, one of the things. And so my most challenging negotiations have been about valuation. I can tell you that in many rounds, we've taken our negotiation up 3 times. So that means that someone that starts at willing to pay $25 million for a company will pay $75 million. That is a life-changing difference. And so those are the times that it really matters, and you cannot be afraid to back out of doing that. But those were some of those were even, we raised at a unicorn valuation. We had to use these techniques as we did this time. We had to call back the investor we wanted, and we had to say, look, this is the round is not going to get done at this price. It's going to get done at this price. And that's just a normal part of negotiation.
That's amazing. I love that. I think you just shared some very tangible, real tips with us. And I think you've answered some of those questions in the chat already. But is there anything else you'd add as something to keep in mind, other than what you've mentioned about building those relationships, going in with that mindset and going in with that absolute anchor?
Yeah. So, tip number 1, and this seems very obvious, is to be prepared. Be prepared for how far you're going to go. And you need to role play. And when you role play, you don't role play the easiest part. You role play the hardest part. You sit there and you look at your partner. I have done thousands of role plays in my life. And I'm like, well, what if they say like, oh, you guys have no competitive advantage? And what if they say, we'll absolutely walk away? And what if they say, I don't know, F off, like we can't do that. People can get angry and you got to be prepared for that. And when you're prepared, it's so much easier. And so, but preparing is not writing notes. It's actually verbally doing the role play. And it's you and like, it's Hannah, it's you and me talking about how we're going to respond. Because as soon as the words have come out of your mouth once, it's 100 times easier for those words to come out of your mouth again. It's very different if they're written on paper. So, and I'll just like cover a couple of these other, questions in the chat. First of all, I am obsessed with critiquing myself when I do this. So every time I do a deal with my partner, we end every call and we're like, what could have gone better? And we are absolutely truthful. And it's like, well, you kind of said this, you kind of said that. That makes you so much better over time. Most people do not want to have that intellectual honesty. They don't want to hear the truth. And you have to be asking for that feedback and getting your feedback. And when you negotiate, it's really powerful if it's you and your partner or you and someone else on your team, because one of you talks and one of you reads faces. And you can tell when people didn't quite understand your point, are not quite sure, are skeptical. And those are really important to make sure your answers get better and better and better. One person asked about lying. I think that, if you lie about highly verifiable information, if you lie, you should think about, your options as there's a wide range of options and you should be aggressive. But I think as soon as you're in lying zone, you're probably in a pretty dangerous place. Or you just understand there's something you can lose. I mean, if you say like, look, I got a competitor that's willing to do that and you got someone know in your back pocket, I mean, you could totally say someone else is bidding on the business, but you have to know you could lose it and you could have nothing. So that's kind of a risk reward, that you play out. I think that on salary negotiation, there's one question on this, and I think it's about bringing comparables. I think it's also, in many times, it's saying like it's setting up what you want the role to be. So I'm also really comfortable when people say to me, "Look, you may not have a lot of confidence in me now, but give me 3 months." Give me 6 months. I'm going to work my tail off. And if that happens, here's what I'm expecting. And those people always get more money from me than I ever expected they were. And they're typically out of salary bands. So I think that what I would leave people with is that you only get good at negotiation by practicing. You practice by a lot of role play. You constantly critique your work. I read a ton of books on negotiation. Never Split the Difference is one of my best books. I try and reread it every year. I think it's so powerful in what to do. And when you become a good negotiator as a woman, you are incredibly memorable and you can build your company a ton of competitive advantages. So it's actually great to see so many women that are interested in this. It is so important.
Thank you so much. Those were amazing tips. And I love this topic, and getting to hear your insights on it is just a free class, honestly. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for everything that you've shared. And I know I'll be taking that back and practicing. But thanks so much, Michele.
Of course, it was great to be here.
All right, we're going to be going over to Nadia, who will be leading our workshop. So Nadia Theodore has over 20 years of leadership experiences in international trade, policy, and public affairs. After holding leadership positions on several major trade initiatives for the Government of Canada and serving as the head of Canada's diplomatic mission to the Southeast USA, Nadia joined Maple Leaf Foods in October 2020 as their Senior Vice President of Global Government and Industry Relations. She's built a reputation for forging strong partnerships with government and business leaders to solve complex, multi-stakeholder issues, and is passionate about ensuring that all sectors are included in the global conversation of representation, equity, and inclusion within organizations, and the deliberate work to build inclusive teams, especially at senior levels. So, Nadia, I'm super excited to welcome you to have your workshop. So, without further ado.
Okay, I have no idea. It's great to be here. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I thought I was in the waiting room, but maybe I wasn't. Anyway, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. So today, this evening, after that amazing session with Michele, I knew I shouldn't have said yes to following Michele. That was a mistake on my part, but I want to talk to you all about negotiations, to follow along from what the wisdom that Michele dropped. And what I thought I would do, and let me just start the presentation here. Can you all see that? I'm going to say yes. What I thought I was going to do today was take you through negotiations beyond the usual narrative. And I say beyond the usual narrative because I think that oftentimes when we talk about negotiation, we talk about the mechanics of it, right? How to ask for more money, how to ask for what you want, how to read the body language in the room, how to get to yes, so to speak. All of those, the mechanics of negotiations. And what I have learned throughout the years, and, over the past several years, I have been in many negotiations, both in a work context, but also in a personal context. What I have learned is that oftentimes the most success in a negotiation comes, or at least the most powerful tools in your toolkit, let's say, when it comes to negotiations, are things that people often don't think about, and things that are a little bit less tangible than the kind of mechanics of a negotiation. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. So a couple of housekeeping rules here that I'm gonna go through, and hopefully I'll do this properly here. First of all, a little bit of a poll. If you can bring up the poll, somebody in the background. I think somebody's gonna bring up the poll in the background. Maybe not. Maybe I will bring up the poll. Okay, I'll start the poll here. Why are you here? I have an upcoming negotiation and I want to learn some tips and tricks. 2, nothing on the horizon yet, but I'm here to learn and get ready because one day my time will come. And then 3, my friend made me sign up with them. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. I'm going to end it. All right. Okay. So 64% of you said nothing on the horizon, but I'm here to learn and get ready because one day my time will come. Well, you know what? For all of you who said that, that to me is the best reason to be here today. Because frankly, getting ready for a negotiation, learning what it is that you need to know before you are under pressure, before you're even thinking about the possibility of going into a negotiation in a work setting, is really the best position to be in. And so, listen, as we go through the workshop, I encourage everybody to chat amongst yourselves in the little chat box. I'm going to try and pay attention to the chat box and work the slides at the same time. But I encourage folks to ask me questions and keep the conversation and the interaction going in the chat box. So first off, and we're going to do these exercises in a second. First off, I want to say that when you're thinking about a negotiation, there are really 3 strategies that I believe lead to success that go beyond the usual narrative. And the first one is really something that this exercise is going to demonstrate to you. So take a couple of minutes, read the exercise here, and I'll read it with you. You're in the final stages of an interview for your dream job, and the organization has presented you with the compensation package. The package presented isn't horrible, but it doesn't entirely meet expectations. Plus, they've said that you'll need to move to a new city to be with the rest of the management team, and that's something that you really didn't want to do. Plus, in your current job, you realized after being there for a few months that you were getting paid way less than your predecessor. And you vowed that you would never, ever let that happen again, and that you were going to make sure that you were paid your worth in your next role. What are you inclined to do in this situation? And you have these 4 options here. Basically, put your foot down, let them know that you're not going to accept anything but what you were hoping for. You know your worth. You accept the offer. You really want the job. The compensation isn't horrible, and how bad can moving really be? You decide that you have no business looking for a new job. You don't want to move, and you wouldn't know where to start negotiating the salary. Plus, what if they end up saying that the offer is no longer on the table? How embarrassing would that be? You tell them that you're no longer interested in the position. Or lastly, you go back to them with a counter offer, right? That asks for a little bit more money, a change in title to something that better reflects what you were hoping for. So a little bit of a compromise. So think about it a little bit and tell me in the chat what you are most inclined to do in this situation. Last option. Okay, the counter offer. 4. Tempted to do 1, but likely to do 4. I like this. I wouldn't do 4, but I'd freak out and choose 2 if I'm being dead honest. I like that. Probably 3. Tabitha. Yep. Okay. I like Tabitha and your honesty. Option 5, Heather. Okay. All right. All right. Tempted to choose 2. I know. Can you read out number 4, please? I would love to, but my little person is covering it, so I can't read it out, to be honest, unfortunately. You go back to them with a counter offer that asks for a little more money, a change in title. I'm trying to remember what I wrote, Ushta, because I know that you're asking me to write it out. A change in title to something that better reflects what you were looking for and what you were being called to do in the role, but letting them know that some of the perks in the compensation package you could live without, right? So it's a little bit of a compromise. It's a little bit of a compromise. All right. So the point here is that you need to, before you even think about a work negotiation, before you even think about succeeding in a work negotiation, strategy number 1 is know thyself. You have to know who you are, and most importantly, not who you are as a person, who you are values-wise, we're going to get to that, but understanding what your negotiating style is. Understanding how you respond in a negotiating environment. So the trick with this exercise is that there's really no right answer. No right answer, no wrong answer. It's all really about this golden rule that's often forgotten in negotiations, is know thyself. How do you respond when you are under pressure? How do you respond when you are in a competitive environment where there are things on the line that really matter to you? Are you a competitive winner takes all type of person? Someone who's kind of prone to caving easily? Or perhaps you're the kind of person that just entirely kind of gives up or seizes with fear because you'd rather avoid the conflict? Or are you someone who's kind of always looking to see what the compromise position is, right? And are always trying to think of what you could possibly give up to get something in return? By understanding what your dominant style is, you can avoid a situation where you kind of blindly charge forward without stopping to think about how your style might affect the outcome of the situation. And it allows you to make very calculated decisions on whether you kind of want to balance your dominant style with some of the other styles in order to get the best outcome. And I'm going to say that again. Once you know what your dominant style is and what the other types of negotiating styles are, you are able in any negotiation to understand whether you want to charge ahead with your dominant style because that's what's going to get you to win, or whether you want to mix in some of the other negotiating styles in order to get to the best outcome. But you can't do that unless you know where you sit, right? Okay, next. I'm trying to toggle back here. Okay. Next strategy. The second strategy, what do you want? Do you know what you want? For many people, and I will say very transparently that I'm very guilty here as well. This is the hardest step. Okay, it's not for many people, and for me, it's the hardest step. Knowing what it is that you want, what you really want, because knowing what you want is not as easy as it sounds. And the trick is that you are not able to prioritize what matters in any negotiation and in any work negotiating situation in particular if you actually don't know what's important to you and what you are looking for in a position, what you hope to gain and what you hope to leave behind once you're no longer there, right? What is it that you really want? So go back to the chat here. What are the different negotiating styles? Yeah, I'm going to give those to you in the end. I'm going to give you some reference points in the end. So this is the exercise for determining what it is you really want. Think about and write down 1 or 2 instances when you felt the most alive, the most authentically you, the most valuable and impactful, like you were living your true potential and you felt that you were doing what you loved and what you were meant to do. Okay, take a couple minutes. It says 5 minutes, but I don't want to run out of time. So take a couple minutes, write down some thoughts, and then put them in the chat. When I was selected as a young director. That's great. And when you think about it, so when I was at the summit, I love research and want to continue. When you think about it, I would encourage you to think, get very specific. Where were you? Who were you with? What exactly were you doing? Like Taran just said, sharing knowledge. Right? Lauren says, the most impactful I have felt is deciding to start my own company, and every time I pitch it, right? Get very specific, very detailed in what it is in a situation that makes you feel like you are making an impact, that you are your full self, that you are doing what you were destined to do? Who are you with? How are they treating you? How are you treating them? What are you talking about? What are you not talking about? Get very specific. And I'll say about knowing what you want, it's that it's not about knowing what or who you want to be when you grow up. So it's not about a title. It's not about a job. It's not even about necessarily a career. And it actually might not be what you want today and what you want tomorrow. You might know what you want today, but not know what you want tomorrow, or vice versa, right? And especially if it's difficult for you to think about this in the context of a job or work experience, think about it in terms of your outside life as well, right? But get very, very specific and try and describe it in lots of detail. So you don't have to finish it right when I faced my finances and started talking openly about this. I love that, Christina. So a sense of courage, right? A sense of being honest and transparent with yourself and with others about where you are and where you want to be, right? Alexa, I like this. On the last day of a job, I realized that was no longer a fit for you. I like that. This is great. This is great. So the point of this is to get you to think not necessarily about jobs or careers or titles, but to get you to think about how you feel when you feel like you are in the right place for you. And this method is not mine. It's from a book called Career Stories by Carrie Twigg, who's also a Canadian, awesome Canadian woman to boot. And I highly recommend it. And the reason why I think this is such an important step to prepare for negotiations and goes beyond kind of the usual narrative is because, in particular, in work situations, when you're negotiating either for the job or for a raise at the job or for a new assignment at the job or to change teams in the job or negotiating to be valued for what you are already doing, the most common mistake that I see people making is going after things or getting worked up about things that they don't even actually care about, right? That they don't even actually want. And sometimes it's because it's what you've been told you're good at, right? Or it's what somebody else wants you to be good at. Other times it's what you think that you should be good at, right? You have this internal dialogue saying, well, you know, I don't know, my dad was a mathematician and so, or my mother was a mathematician and so I should be a mathematician. And, you know, and I'm good at math and they're offering me this mathematician job. And so, you know, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get the best salary that I can get for this mathematician job because that's what I'm good at. And I'm going to, you know, pound my fist on the table and get what I want, which is lots of money for this mathematician job. Well, is it? You know, do you actually know that that is what you want? And the reason why I like this idea of thinking about the stories, which Carrie calls your career stories, in a way that's quite detailed and concentrates on sort of the environment around the situation, who you were with, who you weren't with, how you felt, how you interacted with the people, what made you feel good about it, is because sometimes you might not know exactly what it is that you want to do, but almost always you know how you want to feel doing something. And so if you can concentrate on how you want to feel doing something, especially when you don't necessarily know what exactly it is that you want to do, that will help you in any negotiating situation to actually focus in on the things that matter. So I see that Bailey did it. Sometimes it's what you've been told you're good at. Oh, what do you think you're good at? Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. What's the name of the book? Career Stories. It'll be at the end. I have a little resource page that I'm giving to people. So that's the second sort of tip, okay? Concentrate on figuring out what exactly you want and what the feeling is that you want when you come out of that negotiation, right? And not just when you come out of that negotiation on day 1, when you come out of that negotiation on day 30, on day 60, on day 90, what is it that is going to make you feel like you have won, quote unquote, that you have achieved what you set out to achieve in the negotiation when it comes in particular in a work situation? And if you can do that, if you can actually determine what matters to you and focus in on it, you are, I am telling you, miles ahead of the game and miles ahead of many other people in work situations in particular. Okay, strategy 3. Oh my gosh, we only have 10 more minutes. Okay, strategy 3. I'm gonna speed up here so that we have time for questions. Phone a friend. So I say phone a friend because to me, the third biggest strategy that people often forget when they're talking about negotiations in a work setting is that information is power. And you hear that all the time, collect your data, collect salary stats, try and figure out what the range of salary is for the position. And there are lots of websites now out there that can give you that information. But what I actually mean is collect, and this is why I say phone a friend, collect information about the position, about the people in the organization, about the benefits and the particulars of the culture of an organization from people who you know and that know you. And I say that because what I find is that oftentimes when we're preparing for a workplace negotiation, when we're going in and we're looking for, a salary raise, or we're looking to get hired, or, we're looking to try and, get rightful credit for work that we've been doing for a while. And, we're going into a negotiation. We seek out data, very important, and we seek out information from experts in the field. And that is great. But even more importantly is to seek out information from people who by very nature of knowing you are going to be able to translate that data and that information in a way that's actually going to translate into whether that information or how that information is applicable to who you are as a person. Let me give you an example. And I'll give you a really frank example. When I was joining Maple Leaf Foods, okay? Obviously before I joined Maple Leaf Foods, I started to talk to people, experts in the field, right? Lots of executives, senior executives in corporate Canada and in corporate America, because I was in the States at the time, about, working for the corporate world, asking people about my boss, CEO, Michael McCain, about the sector, etc. And the answers that I got from the experts in the field were very data-driven, right? Very, very data-driven about what corporate Canada looks like, what I can expect in terms of, hours of work and rhythms. And, lots of people told me about Michael and he has a strong character, Nadia, strong character, oh yes, he's well known in the field and people come to him for advice a lot, and, a lot of data. But it was only when I started to ask people who also knew me that I got to the point where they could say to me, oh, Nadia, you know what? You are going to love working with Michael McCain because he's a straight shooter. He takes no BS. And you know what? He knows how to mentor his people. They knew my past history. they knew a little bit about my work experience. And so they had a little bit of an idea, even more than I might know or be able to communicate, about what I would need in a position in order to get me where I needed to be and where I wanted to be in the future. And so strategy 3 is ask a friend, phone a friend for information. Don't just rely on pure data and pure information from experts in the field who don't know you and have very little context for the information that they are providing you. Okay, so I'm going to go to questions in the chat here. Cindy Hovington, are negotiations ever disrespectful to the other party? I'm meeting with a company to pitch a collaboration. Wondering if they offer something, if I can negotiate. From what I learned tonight, I think it's okay to negotiate. Cindy, it is always okay to negotiate. And what I say to people is this: it is always in the way in which you do something, right? It's not whether you do it or whether you don't. Is it okay to negotiate? Is it not? To me, the question is actually, are you approaching the negotiation in a way that is geared towards getting to a solution that works for everybody, right? That works for both parties in this instance. And again, if we go back to what we've learned so far, really and truly, if you actually know what you are looking for, know a little bit about what your style is, if you do start to get pushback, or if you do, if it starts to get a little bit hairy in the room, and you can know that from the beginning, what your style is, you can calibrate that conversation once you get there. So it won't be seen as disrespectful. It will only be seen as looking to get to a win-win, right? Another question. So know the nuances of your industry, company, and people in them. Absolutely, know the nuances of your industry, company, and people in them. But more importantly, I think, understand how those nuances relate to who you are. Because the way that I interpret a nuance, right, of an industry or a company or people in them is very different than how you might interpret it, Ushta. We are two different people with two different mindsets, with very different experiences, I would imagine, very who have different layers of things that are important to us. And so in learning the nuances of an industry or a company and the people, just make sure that you're always calibrating that against who you are and what's important to you, right? Because, and I say this to people all the time in many different contexts, it's amazing to me how people often forget that my best friend can be your worst enemy. And that is really because we are two different people. And so you have to learn about the company and the context and the people in the context of who you are and what you're looking for in that point of time as you go to negotiate with them. I'm going to try and answer one more question from Tabitha. I know I only have 1 minute and I'm pushing the limits, but I'm doing it anyway. What to do if there aren't many people who you know well enough to get feedback? Yeah, that's a tough one. And how can you convert the feeling into negotiating items? Oh my gosh, this is a whole other webinar, Jacqueline. This is such a good question. Okay, so quickly, what to do if there aren't many people who you know well enough to get feedback? That's a tough one, right? Because to me, the best people to get feedback from are from people that know you. And so what I would encourage you to do, Tabitha, is that even if you don't know somebody in the field, make sure that who knows you, ask people that know you, because they might know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, right? Don't be afraid to put it out there to the people who you know and trust, and ask them to connect you to people who might be able to give you feedback, who might be able to explain the sector and the people to you. And you might have to do a little bit, and again, this is why you do it before you get to the hot seat, because it might take a few times, right? It might be a little bit of a commitment to that person, because they will have to get to know you a little bit in order to give you the best advice and the best feedback. So it might not just be one conversation, it might be 2 or 3 conversations. But don't be afraid to ask people who know you, who aren't necessarily tied to the field or the company. I feel like people can be so hesitant to share salaries, but it's so true, Victoria. What did Victoria say? Love this. While we're here, I have to share my hill to die on, which is share your salary. Listen, and I'm a recent convert to this. Share your salary with people. You know, it's uncomfortable. And we were, well, at least I was taught, and maybe you are still taught, that salaries are private. They are not. And the only way that we are going to get ahead, if we are able to say to somebody, hey, I noticed that you're working in this field and I'm looking to work in this field. You know, what have you made? What did you start with and what have you ended with, right? So you understand the range of the salary as well, and what your experience can bring you and bring to the company, and how that converts into salary. So very, very good point, Victoria. We're out of time. Okay, but before I'm starting the presentation again, because I really do have to say to people, I didn't even get to this talk. These are the resources, okay? So Career Stories by Carrie Twigg, Winning from Within by Erica Ariel Fox, which will give you, and she's got a website as well, so you don't have to pay money to buy the book, which will give you the negotiating styles, Crucial Conversation Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High, and then these two websites, which if you put your phone, these are the two QR codes if you want to quickly capture them. Two really good articles about negotiations, in particular for women, and then in particular for women of color. And then I'm always available, because this was too short. So I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter. Send me a note. I will tell you that it might take me a little bit to get back to you, because I can't keep up. But I will get back to you. That I will promise. So feel free to inbox me with any more questions that you have as you read the material and the resources. If questions come to you, I'm very, very happy to engage.
Thank you so much, Nadia. That was amazing. The chat is still going off, so everyone was very engaged with your workshop. And thank you again to Michelle for our amazing fireside chat. And thank you to you, the audience, for your amazing engagement throughout this. I just want to quickly announce the prize winners, Carmina Santos and Julie Ling Ma. We'll be reaching out to you by email, so watch out for that on how to claim your prize. And for the rest of the folks here, we just want to let you know there is an Amazon page where you can all purchase Revlon ColorStay Life-Proof products. We'll be putting it in the chat. And we'll also be sending around a recording of the webinar afterwards. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day. And thank you again, Nadia.
Thank you. I don't know how to leave. I'm just going to go.